Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Breakfast Forum. I'm your host, Adrianna Soverall, and we're going to be discussing Are You Prepared? Hurricane Preparedness and Business Continuity with our experts from the BVI, Department of Disaster Management, also known as DDM. Today, we hope that you will learn the essential strategies to ensure that your business thrives before, during, and after a natural disaster like a hurricane. This webinar will also equip you with the knowledge and tools to maintain smooth business operations in the face of unforeseen challenges. Our experts today are Michel Ambrose, the Planning and Preparedness Manager, Chrystall Kanyuck-Abel, the Information and Education Manager, and Andrew Jackson, the Meteorologist, all from the Department of Disaster Management. So with all that being said, I'm going to hand you over to Chrystall. Chrystall, you're there?
All right. Thanks for having us. That could be just a little sound check. You guys are hearing me okay?
Yes.
Okay, looks like there might just be a little bit of lag, so I'll take my time. Thanks for that introduction. You really hit on the main themes that you'll see repeated as we go through this today, right? So the first thing that I want to share is the main objectives. Of course, we want to cover continuity planning. We're going to talk about some of the major hazards, and we'll spend a good bit of time on hurricanes because we know that is the hazard that's on everyone's mind. And that's why we have roped in meteorologist Andrew today. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about the disaster management cycle. I like to start here because this is a framework to just help you think about how you want to evaluate your own readiness and to guide you as you take steps to be ready for different emergencies and disasters, right? So when we as emergency managers are planning for disasters, this is how we think about it. You could start at any phase and they all lead into the next, right? But to start at impact, this is the moment that the disaster happens or the emergency happens. And we know that for different hazards, the moment of impact can look different, right? Hurricane, we might see it coming well before the actual impact. The same thing kind of happened with the pandemic. We heard a lot about it before it actually arrived on our shores. After impact, you have response. This is like your immediate life-saving needs. You're looking out for health, you're doing search and rescue, you're providing medical assistance. If for a hazard like a flood and people need to evacuate, you're doing that. During the response phase, that's when you're like seeing the sirens, the boots on the ground, the helmets, and all those things, right? After the response phase, when things are a little bit more stabilized, that's when you move into the mitigation phase. Mitigation is really things that you're putting in place based on what you learned from your impact. So the examples I have here are like retaining walls, seawalls, vaccinations. Basically, the mitigation stage is acknowledging that you are not going to prevent every single emergency, but there are things that you can do to lessen the impact on you. And as we'll get into a little bit later, on your business. When you move into the recovery phase, you're really rebuilding, you're really getting back to normal. And this can be both in terms of structures and also in terms of systems, right? I think we saw a lot of this after Irma, where we were like, okay, this or that building is now operating again. But other things, more systemic things, took a little longer. It took a little longer before our kids were back in school on a predictable schedule. It took a little longer for power to be restored throughout the entire territory. But recovery is that process of getting you all the way back to normal. Another way of thinking about it is restoration. And then, of course, we have preparedness. This is really the phase that we're in right now when it comes to hurricanes. We're in the season, we're getting ready, as Andrew will speak about, to move into the busiest portion of the season. And we know that we're vulnerable to this particular hazard, right? So we are in the hurricane preparedness phase. We're doing training like this session today. We're reviewing our plans and ensuring that our teams know the contents of the plans. Some people are running exercises. We have an internal one coming up ourselves just later on this week. And of course, we're assembling supplies. So those are all those things that you're really accustomed to thinking about in terms of disaster preparedness or hurricane preparedness. So another way to think about it, this same cycle is to just tell yourself you have your before, your during, and your after. And based on the hazard, the impact that you're experiencing, these three phases might look a little bit different, right? To take it back to our hurricane example, we spoke about all those preparedness things that we can do, but we might also be doing prevention. Like if we know we have bulky waste in our neighborhood, we might be doing a big cleanup drive in order to prevent the drains from being blocked up and then exacerbating a flood event. During especially for those of us who are like working in the like financial services and those things, really the response phase, the while the impact is happening, your job is just to stay safe, right? Don't put yourself in harm's way, make sure your teams are safe. um, People can stay in contact and have a plan for that. And then of course after is our rebuilding. So, what exactly is a hazard? I'm going to read out the full UN definition here. It's a process, a phenomenon, or a human activity that may cause loss of life, injury, or other health impacts, property damage, social and economic disruption, or environmental degradation. So, you see what they've done with this big, long definition is that they have try to account for everything. Um, can I ask somebody um, to be my volunteer and say what exactly this definition is saying that a hazard is in like maybe a very short sentence? I know it's pressure. Or maybe somebody wants to drop it in the chat for us.
Yeah, I think they'll have to say it in the chat, Chrystall. I don't.
No problem. So I'll just look out for it there. If somebody wants to really take this very descriptive and comprehensive definition of hazard and sum it up for us in like just a few short words. One thing that came up is the unforeseen occurrences. I do think that you've really captured, Natasha, one aspect of a hazard because whether small or large, a lot of times the reason why a hazard is causing these injuries, these health impacts, whatever the case, is because we didn't know they were coming. But really the essential element here, it's harm, right? Anything that can cause harm, whether that's to our environment or to ourselves, to our society, that's a hazard. So, as you can imagine, this is a really big uh, class of items. Lots and lots and lots of different types of hazards and things are hazards, right? Common ones here for us, the things that really come to mind first are going to be your storms, your floods, your earthquakes, droughts, and excessive heat, and also pandemics. And what you see is that some of these things are causing harm to one area of life, and others are causing harm to all areas of life. Um, So it really tells you the hazard environment that we're living in. It's is extremely varied and it is complex. The days when we could say, okay, we're only worried about hurricanes and then we feel good are really long gone. Within the industry, we really are acknowledging that we are needing to get ourselves resilient to multiple hazards. Sometimes they're overlapping, impacts are happening at the same time. And we really have to up our game to be able to respond to these appropriately. I'm gonna now turn you over to Mr. Jackson because hurricanes are very relevant to us right this moment because we're in the season. Go ahead, Andrew, and just let me know when you want me to forward the slides, and I will.
Thank you, Chrystall. No problem. Good morning, everyone. I am happy to be a part of this presentation, and I want to also say thank you for the BVI Finance to have me here today. Well, what I'll be talking about is pretty much like giving an update of what the season has been like so far. But here we have on this first slide where we just have an idea of what the predictions were expected to be for this year, where you have 23 named storms, 11 hurricanes, 5 of which that were expected to become major hurricanes. Now, in comparison to the season, the average season, you're seeing where we would have normally have 14 named systems, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. By comparison, we could see that this year is expected to be an above average year. Next slide, please, Chrystall. Here we have a comparison to show all the agencies that submitted forecasts for this hurricane season. It's about 25 submissions. And if we pay attention carefully, you would realize that all of these forecasts are in the high bracket, which kind of lines up with the previous slide just now. And what this is also saying is that where you see that yellow dot to the left is that the average number of hurricanes that we're expecting for this season could be around 11 hurricanes for this year. Pretty active for this year. Next slide, please. Now, what can we expect? As I was saying earlier, a very active season. And this is mainly in relation to the factors that are active this year. And that those are the high sea surface temperatures, the La Nina effect that is expected to peak in, say, next month. And just for clarity, the idea of the La Nina, what it does, it provides a stable, a more suitable environment rather for storms to develop in the sense that you would have a system coming across like this in a column. So what the La Nina does is that in a La Nina season, there's very low vertical wind shear. And in a sense, what that means is there's less obstruction in the upper levels in regards to these systems. So these systems are pretty much being allowed to develop. And in the other sense, with the sea surface temperatures, that's basically that the fuel that is being that will drive the storm. And also to mention the fact that these sea surface temperatures are also ocean content, that is the depth of which this heat goes into the ocean, is that they're above normal. So it could be a case where we could see a storm develop and it rapidly intensifies over a short period of time. What we will also expect for the rest of the season is the reduction in the Sahara dust. For the last couple of weeks, you would have realized that the season somewhat died down, and this was mainly due to this Sahara dust. But as we go into the third month, we are expecting this dust to die down, and this will also cause the season to get active again. We also see high temperatures and heat index. We experience this every day. um, for at least for the last couple of weeks. I mean, we live in the tropics, and sometimes we take for granted that yeah, we're used to warm temperatures, but things have changed over the last 10 years. And climate change is a real thing and something that we should pay attention to. Next slide, please. Now, we would definitely remember the recent floods. And these floods happened in a time when we didn't even have a system, one of which even occurred pre-season. And this should let us think about what we could expect for the remainder of this season. Because as was predicted by our regional partners in CIMH, they are a regional forecast climate center. What they are saying is that come in August into September, is that we could see an increase in rainfall and severe storms. So this is something, if we are seeing we're just in the pre-season where we have a surge of moisture and we have flooding, just imagine when we get into the peak of the season, what we could possibly expect. We could see more flooding, we could see more stronger storms, just to give an idea of what we could actually see happening as we go through the latter half of the hurricane season. I'm pretty sure we all have seen, or we all would have remembered Hurricane Beryl. But before I get to Beryl, so far we have seen Alberto and we have also seen Chris. So we have seen a total of 3 name systems. And funny enough, the first hurricane of the season was a Cat 5, very big storm. And we saw where Beryl intensified by about approximately 65 miles per hour winds within a 24-hour period. This speaks highly to what I was mentioning earlier about rapid intensification. And that might be a big factor this year. So you might actually see a system develop just outside the Caribbean chain, and it could just rapidly develop into a Cat 3 or a Cat 4. So saying that to encourage us just to be prepared, because based on the whole setup of this season this year, once a storm develops, there lies a possibility that there might be a small window from impact, depending on where the storm is for. Next slide, please. So what's happening now? Here, this is our latest update from the National Hurricane Center. And if you see there, you realize that orange X, that's actually a tropical wave that is approaching our territory. And we should start feeling the effects of this tropical wave um, between tomorrow going down into the rest of the week. Fortunately for us, this system is expected to develop outside of our area. So what we could actually be seeing from this system is in localized rainfall, probably deteriorating sea conditions on the northern side or the Atlantic side. But before I close though, let us be mindful that we are heading into the peak of the season, and what like we could start seeing the season or the Atlantic ramping up again in short order, probably by mid August. And as we approach September, we could see more activity taking place. Let us also remember that the forecasters or the experts are predicting in excess of 20 name systems. Even though we're seeing some level of calm now, it could start up again very soon. So let us be mindful of that as we proceed throughout the rest of the season. Thank you, Chrystall. I'll hand over right now to my colleague, Michel Ambrose.
Thank you, Andrew. I feel somewhat of a like this is a decline in your exciting presentation of what the season is. Most persons are caught up on the weather portion of the hazards, but we really also need to remember there are other hazards besides hurricanes. I know hurricane is on the top of the list, especially for the BVI. We'll get into how we've identified those hazards, but there are some other hazards that we should also keep in mind as we continue on the disaster cycle and preparedness. And so one of the things we want you to remember too, there's other social hazards. While the BVI, well, we haven't seen much of these types, so we can understand how it can affect our lives. There's protests, there's riots, not exactly riots, but there are some things such as looting that is also considered as a riot. We recognize that happened quite a few years ago with the passing of Hurricanes Irma and Maria. There's interpersonal conflict, especially in the organizations, in your homes, in communities. Scandals can also be hazards. We've heard some of those, especially in companies and Panama Papers, and we remember some of these things. I don't want to bring them, rehash them. International conflict, such as wars in other countries that might affect our business, especially if we are just children companies or sister companies in our mother countries, or mother operations is in another country. And crime is definitely a hazard. And some of the things that would help us to be able to put things in place so that we are protecting our personal spaces and our families. Next slide, Chrystall. Technological hazards. We recognize that this is something that people also really need to pay attention to. There's the regular fires within the spaces. We've had even torrential fires outside in the brushes. And as it gets more heated outside, if it's dry for long enough, we can expect, we can also prepare, not expect, that we might have some of these things, especially in the areas of our offices and our homes. Leaks, whether it be chemicals or internal leaks to your building, flooding and so on, spills, hazardous spills, whether it be oil spills, power failures, that can definitely be a hazard, especially if we have if our operations rely on power. We'll definitely have to put some things in place for those, like generators or alternate power sources, telecoms, and communications, such as the falling of the outing of Facebook or WhatsApp, and some of these things we actually depend on daily. And if we don't have them, especially being some of the main ways that we communicate with our clients and some of our other members of the organizations, we heavily rely on social media and the telecoms. And it has been seen, especially recently, with the Microsoft outage and the Facebook outage. Some of these things can definitely be some things that we plan for. And software interruptions. There was the Microsoft I just mentioned, and there's some other things that have happened recently that we should pay attention to, especially in these types of companies that definitely rely on the software to be able to interact with our parent companies and clients. So speaking about the hazards, we've simply just summarized for you. For your particular organizations, you have to do a bit of assessment. Think about your vulnerabilities, how frequent they are likely to happen, and on what scale. I know on a scale from 1 to 5, if I can just simplify, how likely a hurricane, an occurrence of a hurricane would affect your business. If it's up there on 5, you definitely should be putting something in place to be able to handle those things. There are things like pandemics or technological hazards or maybe outings or maybe a cyber attack. Some of these things you would have probably list them in terms of what risk might affect your organization, ranking them from 1 to 5, and especially putting a plan in place to be able to minimize those risks. And obviously, there are those that are down low on the scale, 1, even though they are less likely, but you will determine, even though they're less likely, I still, or your company still needs to put something in place for them in the least likelihood that they would be occurring. And from doing your assessments, I think that is the initial place you would start. Then you will go into thinking about how you would create a plan. But creating your plan and having that assessment or that risk assessment, you also need to consider some of these other points. Making sure that whatever you put in place is compliant with the existing laws and policies. I know most of your company has policies and guiding practices and SOPs. You want to make sure that the plan that you put in place also align with some of those roles and responsibilities within your organizations. You want to make sure not only considering your operations, but you really want to keep the staff in mind, protecting the welfare of your staff, because they're the ones, maybe the greatest asset that you have, and you have to protect the staff. And usually when you prepare such a document, a plan, you want to think not just for now, but you want that document to be able to continue or contain the information that you need to be able to operate for 3 years max. Some people actually review their documents even annually, but 3 years is the max we really like for you to go ahead without reviewing what you've put in place in terms of those hazards. You also want to know especially what activates your plan. You will put something in place, what mechanism or what trigger would have activated your plan, and how you can stand down that plan, what would deactivate that plan. And you would consider the same cycle at the beginning, what would create an environment that would really make you have to activate the plan, and even down to the response and the recovery stage, when do you deactivate the plan. One of the things that we really want persons to understand is it's really not a one-man job. Developing a disaster plan or developing a contingency plan especially requires a team. However, there is a designated officer responsible, but we really want to make sure that all the key persons on the team has a hand in developing the plan. And each one of those persons, especially on that team, would definitely understand their role and how their role contributes to an effective plan. The DDM is also available, but we don't want you to develop this plan on your own, especially some of these companies who also have to answer to a parent company. You definitely have to seek advice from your parent company, but the DDM is available to offer guidance or help you to review and strengthen your plan. So we're here to help. Some of the things that we want you to consider, make sure that your plan isn't general and isn't far-reaching. You really want your plan to be localized. You want it to be location-specific. While there is a parent company and then you have these sister companies or children companies, you want your plan to be focused on your operations. Yes, you're considering the parent company, but you want it to be specific to your operations and your location. If it's the parent's plan, you would definitely give reference to some of your other branching companies. But for locally, we want you to focus on your location and specific to this team in the BVI. We want you to consider all the essential assets that you have, what you need to operate, what you need to be functioning to continue business in an effective way for your clients. We also want you to think about, yes, there is remote or telework, but suppose there's a situation where you can't telework. Have you considered an alternate operating site, a place for your staff to assemble if there isn't a way for telework to progress? Some of these things you would communicate with staff and communicate in your plan, how you would continue those operations, considering the staff and considering the different hazard that might have occurred and may have, I want to say, cancel your initial plans, something that would have impact for your staff and clients. Especially in your plan, if something was to happen at the office, how would you be able to get the staff to a safe location? Have you thought about which route would have been easier for a specific hazard, especially if you're located in the town area? Town is more susceptible. We have an inundation about a few feet, I think. We can share some of this information with you as I think. If you're closer to the shores, what is the safest route to higher levels so that your staff is protected or is safe from impending tsunami? What are your collection points if there was a fire in a specific location? How would you get them out of the building? And how would you be able to account for staff just to make sure everyone is safe and you've counted for all the souls on site? And I did speak about that remote work or that telework considerations, but also think about what if telework is not available, especially if there's power outage or if there is a system or network. Would you put something in place just in case you're unable to, and if there's something that would be documented? For accommodating the staff, especially while they're at the workplace, you want to think about if it is feasible for them to shelter in place. There might be a situation where something has happened and they can't leave from that space. Do you have measures in place to be able to secure the staff? One, make sure that they're comfortable in space, and if they're cut off from outside intervention, if they can probably stay, if there's enough water and enough food supplies. I have situations where there might have been employees with special needs or special medications. If you have something, some sort of a supply storage or emergency storage that would be able to help those staff members be comfortable until help comes. Especially if you know ahead of time, we want you to be able to allow staff enough time to go home and deal with what's happening at home, even afterwards, dealing with the damages, making sure their home life is safe and reasonable, being reasonable before they're able to come back out to the job. Their parents, working parents who have children, who have other caregiving challenges such as care for the elderly, especially when school has called out, that is first before our jobs. Giving consideration to some of those parents who have those particular requirements or particular things to do with their children or caring for an elderly. And so developing a plan, just like if you've seen in the beginning, where you're thinking about the before, the during, and the after. That is how you're logically thinking about developing your continuity plan, your disaster and continuity plan. It kind of goes hand in hand. You want to think about preparedness, prevention. You want to think about how you'll be able to respond. Obviously, making sure that everyone is safe first before you're able to respond, and how you're able to go back out to your business places and recovering, whether you need to rebuild or whether you need to look at what things you need to change so that you make sure your staff continues to be safe. The DDM has a lot of resources. We have plan templates, which I know we've shared with quite a bit of private sector companies. We also offer our expertise in reviewing and feedback to those plans, making sure that we strengthen the plans and make sure that you've considered all the different elements to a business continuity plan, making sure that you've considered all or most of the actual points that you need to just to ensure that your business can continue post a hazard. The DDM also offers a service in terms of evacuation mapping for various hazards, whether it be collection points for fire evacuations, tsunami evacuation routes, which route would have been the safe route. That all of these things would happen with a request, just so that our technical team can discuss with you what is best for your team. There's also functional and non-structural assessments. We don't do structural assessments, the actual structural assessment, but we actually go to your spaces and help you to do what we call like a hazard vulnerability sort of exercise, just to make sure that we help you to understand the different hazards that might affect your operations, maybe the egress, and being able to get away to a safe point. Some of those things we can definitely help some of you with. If you do need assistance, you're simply just gonna request it from our department, and we'll come out to your various business places. There is also hazard vulnerability assessment, but some of this happens prior to construction, but there's some businesses who would still want those hazard vulnerability assessments done. Speaking with our technical team, that can definitely be arranged for businesses or properties that are already existing.
Michelle, permission to interrupt just momentarily because the question came up in the chat. Basically, how do we get one of these plans? I'm going to direct the person, because it was an anonymous question, to our website, www.bviddm.com. If you see along the top of the website, there's a section called Document Center, and you'd be able to see some of the different templates that we have available. And it's actually a really huge library of resources where you can get comprehensive disaster plan templates for your business. These are the same templates that we use in the public service. You can get a continuity plan template, which was developed with ourselves alongside the Caribbean Chamber of Commerce. This is a tool that's more geared towards continuity. And I think it'd be really useful for a lot of the folks that are probably with us here today.
Yeah.
You can get a very short family plan template. It's like just a little one page. You fold it open and it has the essential steps and your essential kit and all of that. So if you've never done a family emergency plan that speaks to your household, that's a resource you can gather. And then what you will want to do once you've developed either your business plan or your continuity plan is you would want to reach out to us via email. I recommend emailing the department, ddm@bviddm.com, gov.vg, and then that way our accounting officer can direct it to the right person, because if it's a plan review, it might be Michelle. But if you want to request the HVA that she was speaking about, or the functional or non-structural assessment, then that might go to our mitigation team.
Right.
And please do keep the questions coming. We'll answer those, because are we coming to the end now, Michelle?
Yeah, I think we are. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for that
so we want
addition,
to hear all the
Chrystall.
questions.
Yeah. You guys feel free to ask us any question. We're really open to try to help you to understand or guide you on how we can help you better prepare for these various hazards and developing a really good continuity plan for your organization.
I see that we have the link to our website in the chat, which is very helpful. I think with permission from y'all, Adrianna, I'll stop sharing my screen, and I'll drop a couple more links for our app
Okay.
and for that's in case people don't have that yet.
Also, the email address you're going to put in the chat, Chrystall,
No problem. I'll add that right now.
because that was the question.
Yeah,
Where
that's a
can
new
we send
one.
the email? Where can we send email to request for a copy of the plan templates? All right, we have a lot of attendees in. It's over 50 of you. Any more questions for our experts today? Anything pertaining to how best to prepare for hurricane season, if that's what's most interesting right now, since we have this this cloud that's gonna go above us. It's not coming at us, it's going above. I say, good morning, all. Excellent presentation. My question is how to go about securing sandbags. From Sherilyn Francis.
We love a practical question. At this point in time, we as a department don't distribute sandbags, but we definitely can recommend any of the local hardware stores will get you the materials that you need. And we work very closely with the BVI Red Cross, and very often they will make sandbags available, sometimes only a few per household. If you're doing a commercial operation, that's a little bit more of a struggle, right? Because of course we know to go out and just take sand off the beach is not allowed. So you have to make that investment in your sandbags. But we do love that as a practical question. And I hope that folks are paying attention. You know, if they got flooded in May and they got flooded in June, very likely as the season continues, they can expect that that may happen again, right?
I'm always seeing sandbags, so just like Chrystall said, any of the hardware stores. I've seen most recent, I think CTL had them. Any more questions, or should I go ahead with my question?
Maybe your question will spark some more thoughts.
Okay. I mean, you did, every time I wrote a question, Michelle was answering them. So I was like, well, maybe if she can, I think more specifically, Michelle, if she can go back over how businesses can assess their vulnerabilities to natural disasters. I know you were mentioning about doing a rating.
Okay, I can answer that. I also saw something else in the question and answer section. Can you share more guidance on how, as a company, can protect staff welfare? Now, as Chrystall said before, you know, on the website, there are tools that you can use to do personally your vulnerability assessments, the hazard assessments. Simply in those teams, you're going to sit down and think about some of those things that what if it occurred would disrupt my business or cause me to lose money? I'm gonna put it in that perspective. What would cause my bottom line to be reduced? And some of those things, we know interruption to business, such as maybe a hazard like a hurricane happening that can take you out a few days. That would means that you won't be able to conduct business for a few days, and that means you would be losing money. Something such as a pandemic, we all have that experiences. I believe hurricanes, pandemics, earthquakes, tsunamis. Some of those things would be higher up on most persons' list. If you're a web-based company and you rely heavily on social media or the internet, that would also be higher up on their hazard list too. What if my servers went down? How would I be able to continue business? And so for some of those things that are high 5s and 4s, you're gonna especially put something in place. If it was to occur, I do this next to be able to get my business up and running in the shortest amount of time so that I can save money or continue to make money. And generally that is what business continuity is. Especially to in terms of succession. What if something simple as going on leave? If my supervisor is going on leave and my supervisor is the only person who has the password to the safe, who next can I contact to be able to get into that safe? Am I gonna call my supervisor from leave to get this safe open when it comes to continuity?
I think, Michelle, you were sticking at the very end.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. It did something weird, the internet. But I hope you got the essence of what I said.
I mean, this is
If
a clear example of it. Like the internet's going bad. What are we gonna do?
exactly. And if you're gonna consider some of those things that would disrupt the internet going out and what to do next. I think I was trying to give an example in terms of succession. If the supervisor is out on
Yes.
leave, right? And they're in Bali and we can't get them, who next would have the information? How can we continue business? And some of those things we consider in business continuity. I think the other question was,
Can you share
The
more
question of
guidance?
staff welfare.
yeah,
Right.
in business, we don't want to just think about the bottom line only. I think our human resources is, if not our most important asset. And so we really want to help to make sure that our staff is safe, one, and that their mental or their preparedness or the mental state is also safe. It is, I think, not really productive that when you are asking staff to perform in business and their mind is on home, their mind is on how my family is, my mind is on how I can prepare my property. And most businesses definitely have one, making sure that your home is prepared, your home is ready, and your home is safe first before we consider our operations. I think that's a really good approach. And especially some of those different dynamics to be considered. If you're a family that have children or elderly, we're going to want to make sure that that is in place. Especially after Irma, we've had a lot of persons who are I don't want to call it shell shock, Chrystall, but they're really concerned that they really don't want the reoccurrence and they don't want to be in similar situations. So their employment or the persons would do staff welfare checks, making sure they're talking to them, making sure they're supporting them. If they do need assistance, they would be offering some of this assistance to their staff. And I believe that is important. While we're thinking about our own business, we really need to be thinking about how to bridge or how to help the staff take care of their families first. And then we consider the office.
Right. The other option that you can do, and this is what we try to do in the public service, at least when there's a storm coming, is we actually try to plan it out a few days in advance, right? If we know something is coming, we are asking folks to gather up their essential tools in case they need to work from home. We're asking folks to button up their workspaces in terms of watertighting things,
Yeah,
covering things
preparing.
down, unplugging certain things, right? And what we're asking folks to do is start with that and then go home and take the last 24 hours before an anticipated impact to take care of what you need to do at home. I really appreciated, Michelle, when you were speaking about the family situations, right? Because I can look at our team as an example. We will very often, because we're on duty throughout the response phase, we'll very often have to set up a rota, and we'll say, okay, Michelle and Chrystall are going to be on from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Why? Because we have school age kids, and it's just easier for us to be on in the daylight hours. And then maybe different members of the team might take on. We might pass off to Andrew for 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. again, right? So those are some of the things that you can think about putting in place that can happen for your continuity operations as well, right? Where you say, I'm going to anticipate after a major impact that folks are going to have a lot to tend to at home. So we're going to say, in the morning is when you're going to be tending to whatever needs you have at home. And we're going to ask you to come in the afternoon and assist with clearing out damage in the office, doing assessments, reaching out to clients and reestablishing contact, whatever the continuity duties that you have to attend to, and sort of splitting it up that way. Because at the end of the day, I think what we need to recognize is that folks are only human, and if you are concerned because your grandmother doesn't have a roof over her head, you're really not going to be able to bring your A game to work, to a recovery setting, to where you really have to be able to give your all in that scenario.
Well, now that I heard you speak on that, Chrystall, I was thinking back on Andrew's weather forecast, and it was predicted that may cause local rainfall for the weekend, but I don't think that persons are in that mentality for preparation. I think that persons are in the festival and celebrating mentality. So then what can people and businesses, especially businesses too, because there are businesses that are in the mindset of making money this week and going into the weekend, they're not thinking about preparing anything. Maybe some tips of what they can do in a way that they can operate and still keep that weather forecast in mind, because we had that well, it was a flood to me. We had that flood some weeks ago. It was like this weird rain cloud that rained. What was the record amount of rainfall within a half hour? Like we just want to know if we should prepare for something like that.
I would have allowed
And
Andrew to jump in here if he can, but we can support Andrew.
All right. As you rightfully said, most people are thinking about money at this particular point in time. For the weekend per se, the weekend might be better, so to speak. What we're looking at really is more tomorrow into Thursday, with possibility of lingering showers on Friday. It might not be a flood event like what we had in the previous weeks, but don't want to downplay things, because the thing about it is, as I was encouraging other interactions, it's not a case of to be worried and scared and getting all confused as to what to do, whatever. It's more a case of being on the prepared side, so that if something happens, we could be ready. Because I think why the the events of the floods earlier this year was the way it was. Rather, it was because of, I think, the level of preparedness wasn't quite there at that point in time. So given that we're going into the peak of the season, yes, we're thinking carnival and we love carnival and it's the big 70, right? We actually got fortunate, I would say, for it to shift somewhat because it could have easily been a tropical storm heading to the territory this weekend. Fortunately, we might be just getting some added rainfall to cool down the place because it's really hot. So that's what I would say.
Because I was looking at it saying, we really don't want it. And I'm in my mind, I'm just ignoring it a little bit. But now it's like, okay, I did go to the grocery store and I bought 2 cans of bug spray and I bought, some crackers and a few cans of, non-perishable food items. But I'm just like, I'm not panic shopping. This is not what my budget is for.
But
So
also, I think it's such a good point that you raise about how mentally or emotionally we react when we see that something might be coming. It's so tempting to bury your head in the sand and be like, I'm not going to think about that. And especially for those of us who went through Irma, we still have trauma. Like, that's the real reality, is that we are still emotionally healing from that experience. But what I hope persons can do is, sit with the discomfort for a minute and allow yourself to really hold space for what you've been through, and then remind yourself what it is that is still within your power to do, even if it's just have a little 2-day supply of food, to check the batteries and make sure you're going to be able to listen to emergency updates on the radio if the power is out, and just to make sure those spare water canisters are full heading into, a long weekend or the festive season or whatever the case.
Oh, now you said water and battery operated radios. No, ma'am.
What
I don't
I
want to
would like
hear
to
it.
No,
add,
really just
what I would like to add though, from a continuity standpoint, since we're talking continuity, is, and to add to what Chrystall is saying, don't be in a panic situation. Now that we say yes, we got this relief from possibly Debbie, right? Instead of have this rush of everything, let us keep doing things in bits and pieces. Nonetheless, bits and pieces. As Michel alluded to, mental health is critical, and we tend to ignore that. And in order for us to make good decisions, we have to be mentally sound as best as possible. So let us do things in the sense of portions by portions as we could manage them. And even with the businesses per se, we could take that same mentality and that ideology and put it into practice, so that when things do happen, we are already way ahead. And say, for example, say we get a good season, even though the experts are forecasting a very active season. What do we do then? Do we like, okay, let's wait till next year? Let us see how we could continue to build as we go on further.
Okay. Something came to mind about if it's like a good time to check on your insurance coverage, and what type of, if you all can offer advice on that for businesses that are in hurricane prone areas like Road Town.
We did.
Like not
glad you
hurricanes,
I
shared
but
that
think
like
because I was
last
about
floods.
to
season we
say,
did
I wanted to share some
forum with some of the insurance
as a
providers, and I think one of the things that they shared with us at that time was the importance of really knowing what are the terms in your policy. One thing that folks learned the hard way after Irma was that the value of their property was not up to date. And then another thing that people were concerned about was, they're not fulfilling their responsibilities as a property owner, right? But just out of ignorance. So not knowing that your policy specifies you need to take steps to mitigate further damage, right? So let's just say your window blew out. It's really incumbent on you as a property owner to set up a tarp, tape it up, and prevent further water intrusion and prevent further damage. And you may be obligated to do that as part of your policy. I think when it comes to business, most folks probably have a much better idea of what's covered and what isn't covered, because the stakes are so high in that consideration. But this is really that time of year when you want to make sure you know the contents of your policy, and also what the procedures are if you need to make a claim. You know exactly who your agent is that you should be in touch with, and that they know that you are a responsible person, even down to payment schedules. One thing that they have latitude to do as insurance providers is they can say, well, Michelle hasn't paid up for 2024, but she was in touch with me last week, and so I know that she intended to pay. So we're going to consider her policy still active based on the understanding that we knew she intended to pay. So those are some things that we learned from them at that point.
How about Michelle, did you have a note on that as well?
Chrystall and Andrew, they're very correct, and they were going into some of these things that business continuity especially looks at. So they did cover quite a bit. I can also add, for persons who are in festival mode, especially when you are away from the office, you would have been thinking about those key personnel. There are persons who are, I don't want to say key, but there are persons who may not be needed in such an event, but there's key personnel within your organization that you must call on, like maybe the maintenance person or so on. And I'm just urging businesses, especially ahead of the season, or even now preparing for festival weekend, being closed for so long, prepare the spaces as though a storm is coming. You're gonna, especially that you're away from the building, you're gonna prepare the equipment, unplug things, cover them down. You're gonna move things away from the window, prepare just in case there might be a flood, especially if you're on the ground floor. Think about putting some of those sandbags in place so that your mind is a little bit more at ease while you're we call it tramping or coming down Parade Road, that you know that you've prepared your space, you've put things in place just in case something happened while you're out there having fun.
Even you mentioned earlier about the certain hazards or risk. So maybe if it's not even just weather, but like during this time we have visitors here, it gets crowded for whatever reason, persons get into a different kind of spirit. So if it's not a natural disaster, but perhaps like to have your cameras up and your locks, everyone who needs to have a key has a key in case of like theft or burglary. If you can expand on how businesses can prepare in that sense. I know you touched on the technology part, which was really important given all the recent events. But how else? I guess, or maybe I touched on it. I don't know.
You broke up a bit, but I
I think
think you're
you did.
talking about, yeah, talking about security and preparing, making sure the spaces are safe. I know most of the companies, you also have subscriptions with some of these security companies. You have the cameras up, you make sure that they're working, make sure your servers are backed up. You just make special contact with some of the security companies. Some places actually have an on-guard security officer. So we just need to just touch base with those persons to make sure all the security measures are in line. Speak with your IT. The IT guy is very important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Taking it back to insurance, because it did come up with the in the Q&A section of the chat. I
Okay.
wanted to remind folks that we are actually under a relatively new insurance act now, because after Irma, one of the things that was recognized was that we really just wanted to make sure that insurance companies were going to be accountable to the folks that are here. So there's a lot of communication obligation. Basically, you as a policyholder, you're entitled to have your policy explained to you in plain language. You're entitled to be able to ask questions and receive answers. You are entitled to be request updates, and basically they are obligated to be very transparent with you. So if at any time you feel like there's a conflict or you're not being done properly by your insurance company, they also have I can't remember if it's a tribunal or an appeals board, but basically as an industry, the insurance association will kind of make sure that they're keeping each other accountable to good behavior and responsible coverage for all of us.
Okay. There's another question after that, Chrystall. Is anyone aware of a safeguard put in place for price gouging that may potentially irritate and already irritating and concerning rebuilds after an event? This may turn a rebuild into an additional disaster when people begin to rebel. I mean, that's a good one. Might Did you all hear me? My screen was like frozen for like a half a second, or you didn't hear me at all? Oh, I can't even hear you, Chrystall.
No, that was my bad. I was muted.
Oh, so did you hear my
But
question? I'm
but
sorry.
you were reading the question, right? So
Yes,
I heard the first half.
I can reread it.
I'm not sure if I would call it a safeguard, but I know that this whole issue of price gouging is one of those is very touchy, especially right now, because all of us are seeing our costs go up for just daily living. I want to say that this is something that would really wind up falling under the National Disaster Management Council's governance responsibility, right, in terms of legislation. But I wonder, Michelle, if you might be able to add on.
Michelle, you're there? Okay, I'm seeing her move, but I don't know if she heard the question posed, Chrystall.
Um, just to recap it, it came in the Q&A box. The question is, what if any safeguards are in place to prevent price gouging after a disaster? And the questioner rightly raises that it becomes a security issue, right? Because if people can't access what they need, and they understand that it's because the prices are being artificially inflated, then that really can lead to some kind of civil unrest. I'm not aware of any particular legal safeguards, but I want to say that this is something that could be handled on the governance side of the National Disaster Management Council. And I was asking Michelle if you had anything to add, because I know you work with a couple of the other committees.
Okay. I hear you now. It was breaking up a lot from me, and I heard nothing of that initial chatter. But I agree with Chrystall. I know there have been discussions even of late in terms of pricing control and gouging, and then especially having agreements or MOUs with some of these supplies, people like Clarence Thomas and Drake's and so on, just to make sure that they have supplies on hand if for these types of emergencies. And those discussions are happening as we speak. But I'm sure that something will come out, especially to the public once those conversations are done, just to help us to understand that these companies are they're really not allowed, but there is mechanisms in place through the governance sides of the NDMC and some of the other committees within the NDMC, just to make sure that we help, especially the public, rebuild and rebuild safely.
Thank you for that answer. So I think we're coming near the end. Does anyone else have any questions you would like to type and let us know, let the experts know while we have their direct attention?
If there are any specific resources, I did drop some links in the chat to get the app, but we can link specific resources if folks are interested in that as well.
Chrystall, is now a good time to talk about our group, our WhatsApp group?
Oh, you have a
It's
WhatsApp group?
not a WhatsApp group.
I was like, a WhatsApp group?
But what we did do this year, we launched a WhatsApp channel, right? So thanks, Michelle, for reminding me, because I do want to share about it. We know that a lot of us are social media power users, right? We're all the time scrolling, and we want the information to come to us. With a group chat, there's a lot of back and forth, which can be helpful. But in terms of emergency information, what we wanted to do was eliminate too much of like, thanks, received, noted, got it, those kinds of alerts that we don't all need to see. So if you search for the BVI, Department of Disaster WhatsApp channels, our communities area, you'll see us pop up, and I'll try and add a link in the chat too when we're done speaking about it. But this, basically the idea is, I know you don't want to have to look through everything that I post on Facebook about this or that expo that we're doing, or a general preparedness tips to get your specific hazard emergency information. So with the WhatsApp channel, you're only getting one test message per month plus any emergency alerts. So like if Andrew is going to hit us with a dust alert, or if there's a watch or a warning issued from the forecasters in Antigua, if there's safety action that you need to take, the same information would go out on our app, on the WhatsApp channel, and via SMS through our partnership with the cell phone providers.
Okay,
And to all,
the WhatsApp channel isn't ready yet, right? Oh, you're muted, Chrystall.
I just have to dig up the link, but I'm going to drop it in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
something to also add, we also have our radio station, ZDOC. It's 88.7 on the FM band. What will happen also during the event that we have an emergency or like a hurricane situation or stuff like that, you could get those information also on the radio station as well. I know from time to time we're in the whole technological phase, but back to basics, sometimes we end right back there, and we will still need to hear from our normal battery readers, and the Department of Disaster Management will have our own radio stations that we could broadcast during that period. It's not a radio station that will be on all the time, but once it's on, it's usually during a situation of great importance, like a hurricane situation per se.
All right, so we're coming towards the end. Are there any final words or thoughts of advice that the team would like to offer our attendees in preparing their business and during this hurricane season?
I definitely want to thank you guys for having us and for putting this forum together so that we can speak to the business community, you know, in a way that's convenient for them. And I also want to thank everybody who came and attended. You can see from the questions that persons have such a really diverse range of interests and concerns. And we want to meet people where they are with that too. Everyone's situation is different. So being able to plan your response appropriately, it takes some deep thought and some careful consideration. So we appreciate folks making the effort. There was one last question about the WhatsApp chat. So Miss Francis, if you're not able to use that link, give us a call at the office at 468-4200 after we end our forum, and I'll be able to send you a direct link on WhatsApp if you like. But yeah, thanks everybody for making the effort, because it really does take all of us to be ready.
From my standpoint,
I just want to say
I would just like to encourage us that the way things were 10 years ago is different from it is now. And 10 years from now, it will be different also. So what I would just encourage us to do is be mindful and aware of how things are changing and make the necessary adjustments as we go along.
Thank you, Andrew. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you, team. I really just want to help persons to understand that the Department of Disaster Management is here to assist in every aspect of your planning. We're here to support with tools, and we're here really just for guidance, because our overall goal is to make sure everyone has the tools to be able to prepare, respond, and be able to recover. And so even after this session, if you really need to contact, I think Chrystall shared our contact details. There's the ddm@gov.vg. Share any requests that you need us to do. And then you can also give us a call at 468-4200. We are really just here to support you. We really want to make sure that everyone remains resilient, and that even after something occurs, you guys can be able to continue business and stay safe doing it.
All right, thank you all so very much for being here with us today for this breakfast forum on the topic of Are You Prepared? Hurricane Preparedness and Business Continuity. Thank you for your DDM, Chrystall Kanyuck-Abel, the Information and Education Manager, Andrew Jackson, the Meteorologist, and Michel Ambrose, the Planning and Preparedness Manager, all for this thorough presentation. I think we all took a lot of tips and tricks even during this festival season. We also have something spiraling above us, but it's going to pass us in the name of Jesus. But I'm so glad that you all were able to do this for our business community in particular, and how they can go about whatever tips for pre, during, and after any type of disaster, natural disaster, and particularly hurricanes, as we're in hurricane season. For more information on how you can best prepare, you can visit DDM's website at www.bviddm.com. You can email ddm@gov.vg. There's links in the chat that Chrystall provided. If you go, there's links for iOS users to download the app, or for Android users, as well as a BVI DDM WhatsApp channel. And it's not like a group. It's not like the WhatsApp groups that we're all in that we hate, but we have to be in them, right? But it's more of a mechanism for announcements, and it will coincide with when they make the same announcements and alerts on the app and the website and their social media pages. And of course, too, if you have any other questions and you are not able to get to them for whatever reason, you can easily contact BVI Finance. You can email info@bvifinance.vg, or shoot us a message on our socials. We'll be happy to get back to you. I think I'm going to go ahead and have the slides sent to all of our attendees. We have their email addresses, so we'll be sure to get that to everyone as this webinar concludes. So again, thank you all for taking the time today and tuning in. Happy 70th Emancipation Festival and 190 years of emancipation on a whole. And all be safe and be vigilant and enjoy yourselves. I'm Adrianna Soverall. I've been your host for today from BVI Finance. Thank you, and join us again for our next webinar.